Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me today, not only to be back in Vermont to see a lot of familiar faces that I know and some new ones, but more specifically to be here with you, with VAHHS, an organization that I was really proud to be a member of and a leader. I had the privilege of serving as the board chair of VAHHS during my 8 years of service, and the invaluable friendships that I made and I continue to this day to call upon. So as I look back now at my time in Burlington, it's really remarkable to think of all that's changed for us since then. In fact, in just those 8 years, from 2003 to 2011, while I was president and CEO of then Fletcher Allen, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the Android, the iPhone, the iPad, the Kindle were all born. And in the 11 years since moving to Kansas City and saying goodbye to my Fletcher Allen team and colleagues at UVM, the advancements have really only gained speed and momentum. We've seen the rising convenience and ubiquity of smart technology, leading to an evolution in the very basic ways we live and manage our daily lives. For example, on any given day, you might receive a notification that the item you ordered just before falling asleep last night will be at your door soon. A half hour later, you watch an alert on your phone to the fact that the doorbell has detected someone on your front porch. When you get home, you collect your package and tell Alexa to read you the day's headlines while you change. You check on the Instapot, which you started several hours ago on a Bluetooth connection. And then finally, you clip into your Peloton, my favorite part of the day, and join a scenic ride through the Napa Valley. And to be fair, that inspires you. You might just open your Uber Eats app to order some wine for dinner. The point is that for the last 10 years, our lives have been constantly and rapidly evolving in ways we couldn't once have imagined. And you know, I appreciate everybody who's standing back there. You're more than welcome to stand and leave, but this is going to be a while, so if you want to sit down, by all means, feel free to. And as a result, you know, our lives look very, very different today than when I was sitting out here at the last VAHHS meeting, and I am so appreciative to be here in person. You know, the joy you feel now when you walk into a room where we're all together is not lost on any of us. And, you know, it's hard to believe that we really took that for granted. And I think, you know, one of the lemonade out of lemons in the pandemic is what a joy it is to have colleagues and to be together. So for those of us in the world of healthcare, in addition to the constant evolutions we've been feeling for years, there was a defining moment of sudden irrevocable change, March 2020. A moment when we as healthcare leaders and providers were tasked with the charge to meet overwhelmingly new challenges with increasingly less effective old solutions. Since those earliest first days of the pandemic straight through to today, our teams running hospitals and health systems across the country have continuously stepped up. Our clinicians and support teams have sacrificed their health, safety, and wellness. And our leaders have pushed the limits of their own capabilities and resilience, working to find and implement solution after solution to every new obstacle that emerged. It seemed hourly, but it certainly was daily. And they still keep coming, because as is now evidently clear, COVID-19 was neither the beginning of our industry's most pressing challenges, nor will it be the end. It was simply a definitive and irreparable breaking point along a much longer timeline. Today, on that timeline, nearly 3 years past those early days, our charge continues. Find solutions. And if there are none to be found, we innovate. Whatever lasting positive change we can create for our patients and people, we will do. To bring this action call to life, I want to share with you a simple but inspired observation made by author and poet James Baldwin, who in a 1962 essay wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced." These words get to the heart of where we are today. To move forward, we must find balance, but to find balance, we must face and accept the fact that the traditional healthcare models in which we were educated and trained simply do not work anymore. So let's take Mr. Baldwin's advice and face that, because then the work can begin in earnest to bring about real, lasting change for our patients, for our people, and for good. For years, our hospitals and health systems from Burlington to Kansas City have felt the strain of multiple and growing challenges facing our industry. Whether it was the pre-COVID nursing shortages and employee wellness statistics that actually now seem quaint, like the 2012 New York Times article reporting that half of physicians and 62% of nurses were experiencing symptoms of burnout, numbers that today are almost enviable. Or the healthcare industry disruptors who began popping up a decade or so ago, continually finding ways to cherry-pick healthcare services and question our commitment and resolve for our patients. Whether it was rising costs, shrinking reimbursements, or the need for more transparency, the heated state and federal battles over healthcare politics and coverage, or the concerning state of the American patient population, sicker, aging, and in crisis, opioid addictions and an obesity epidemic, countless untreated behavioral health disorders leading to large-scale tragedies, as became so evident in 2020 after community without access to quality care and struggling with insurmountable health disparities. And COVID only made matters worse. As we sit here 3 full years into the pandemic that only seems to change instead of actually ending, many of these challenges still plague us. It's no secret that over the course of the pandemic, we've lost 1/5 of our workforce. In 2021 alone, we lost 100,000 nurses across the United States, gone on to far less stressful jobs in other fields, or laid off because of shutdowns and budget cuts. Some chose to stay home and spend more time with the family they barely saw for the entirety of 2020. Others chose to leave rather than be vaccinated. Too many died or are ill themselves, still working toward recovery. And then there were those just too fatigued after too many incidents of unrelenting stress, anger, fear, and even violence. Many of them simply walked out without no plans at all, because anything was better than what they were experiencing in their roles serving patients in our hospitals. What's more, with critical shortages in nursing schools, we're now seeing our pipeline of future nurses dry up. Because while we did see across-the-board increase in nursing school enrollments in 2020, the sad fact is in that same year, more than 80,000 qualified applicants were not accepted, largely due to faculty shortages. This problem is not going away anytime soon. This is a hole too deep to climb out of using the same old tools. We need new tools. Or even better, we need a whole new kind of workshop. So let's start with a step back to better understand today's pressing issues. First, as we struggle to keep units and beds open with fewer care providers, we know we're also treating an empirically sicker population. For the more than 70 million aging baby boomers in the U.S., research shows they're on track to be the sickest and costlier generation. 40% are already now obese, and in the coming years, they'll be more likely to have multiple health problems and to develop them up to 20 years sooner than their parents or grandparents. And that's just the boomers. According to the AHA's 2021 Cost of Care report, more than half of all American adults have been diagnosed with at least one chronic condition, such as diabetes or heart disease, and 27% have 2 or more. Meanwhile, as you all know too well, having recently completed 2 weeks of budget hearings before the Green Mountain Care Board last month, a body I do not miss, Hospitals and health systems nationwide are facing severe financial crises, with several factors really colliding into a perfect storm. According to a May report from Kaufman Hall, the national healthcare financial services firm, the largest impact, of course, has been in labor expense, which have risen by more than a third from pre-pandemic levels. For many hospitals and health systems, St. Luke's included, the driver of these extreme labor costs, our labor costs are up 18% over the last 2 years. It's been a steadily increasing reliance on contract staff, especially nurses. In fact, in 2022, according to Kaufman Hall, these temporary labor costs accounted for 11% of hospitals' total labor expenses. By contrast, in 2019, that number was just 2%. But of course, it's more than that. A report last month from AHA showed that because non-COVID patients had been choosing to delay or avoid care during the pandemic, there was about a 10% increase in overall patient acuity, leading to additional costs for additional staff, equipment, and supplies needed to adequately treat those patients. Then, besides skyrocketing labor costs and sicker patients, we've also seen declining revenues, plummeting margins, ongoing supply chain shortages and disruptions, general inflation, and climbing interest rates, not to mention a toxic socio-political culture and an uncertain future. Volatility is everywhere. With these challenges, it's no surprise we're seeing troubling headlines for healthcare providers across the country, like Boston-based Mass General Brigham, reporting a net loss of nearly $1 billion at the end of June, among others. In our rural markets, as many of you know all too well, the challenges have been just as real. In response, CMS created the Rural Emergency Hospital. It was part of the $2.3 trillion Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. The Rural Emergency Hospital designation is intended to help struggling rural and critical access hospitals from having to shut their doors to their communities. Instead, the idea is for them to transition to provide only outpatient, observational, and emergency care services. In exchange for the conversion, these hospitals will receive a monthly facility payment set to increase in subsequent years, and the outpatient services they provide will each receive an additional targeted payment. As these rural emergency hospitals go into effect January of 2023, the hope is that they will promote equity in healthcare for residents of their local communities, while also providing a financial benefit to the hospitals that are making fundamental changes to their structure, staffing, and scope. In theory, a reasonable course of action. The data, however, shows that the benefits simply are not there yet, at least not for the St. Luke's health system. We have 4 critical access hospitals, 2 in Northwest Missouri and 2 in Southeast Kansas. A financial impact analysis provided by the Kansas Hospital Association, our critical access hospitals, break even is not making money, but sometimes that's okay. All have either break even or positive margins, showed estimated losses of 11% and 25% for our 2 hospitals in rural Kansas. And an independent analysis we commissioned from an industry leader, VAHHS, fell right in line with that assessment. The fact is, right now, the incentives for this conversion simply do not equal the projected losses. Aside from the financial pieces, where do we transfer these patients from critical access hospitals, from our community hospitals? Access into secondary, tertiary, quaternary hospitals is limited. So without greater clarity or congressional action around whether rural emergency hospitals will maintain their 340B status, it creates even more uncertainty. I think until some of these current concerns are addressed, I think it is difficult, if not impossible, for rural hospitals to embrace this new model. And it is a fact that we have chosen to not embrace the model. It is not ready for prime time in our estimation. To move forward out of the crisis, we first need to balance the very basics of healthcare supply and demand, because the imbalance we're living with right now is not sustainable. And you know, that imbalance is really very simple and very clear. There are more people needing higher levels of care for more and more complex conditions. At the same time, we have fewer people to deliver that care. It's only going to get worse. And you know, there is no magical recruitment campaign, scheduling matrix, or perfectly expanded grid that is going to bring relief, although goodness knows we've tried it all. It really can only come through significant, non-traditional, shattering change. As Deepak Chopra perfectly summarized, all great changes are preceded by chaos. Chaos we have. Now it's time for great change, and it's up to us to usher them in. You know, in many respects at St. Luke's, we were fortunate. When COVID-19 hit, we were already moving our health system in a direction of innovation. We had invested heavily in dollars and determination, making our 16-hospital health system fully integrated, tech-forward, and more patient-focused. We didn't know it then, but we were laying the foundation for the reinvention to come. Throughout the worst of the pandemic, and we had 4 surges, some of them fairly significant, our clinicians and care teams stayed focused, heads down, on the crisis at hand, exactly where we needed them to be. But meanwhile, it was up to us as leaders to stay focused, heads up, looking at the crises coming ahead and actively planning a new path to take us forward. While many healthcare leaders across the country continued making incremental change, we decided to start over. We wanted to build from the ground up and really do the hard foundational work to identify exactly what the best care model in this new landscape would look like. To get there, we focused every discussion and decision on 2 overarching questions: what's best for the patient and what's best for the care team. Starting with a collaborative, cross-functional team of leaders, care providers, and administration at its core, our St. Luke's Care Reinvention Initiative began with in-depth analysis, brainstorming, and conversation. Our nurses and ancillary care team members were surveyed, observed, and interviewed, all with the goal of finding out how to help our teams run smoother, be more time efficient, more patient-focused, all without the expectation of a significant influx of new nurses. One of the things we heard at first was, well, you know, we'll just wait, there'll be more nurses, and, you know, hope, as all of you know, is not a strategy. And through that work, we learned that the answer lies in the strength of the team, the whole team. St. Luke's Care Reinvention, we discovered, was about creating a system of collaboration, much as was talked about on the video, and support, a scaffolding structure, if you will, that would let each person in each role focus on the tasks that meet their specific skill set and training, giving our clinicians and nurses the freedom to always work at the top of their license, doing work that only they can do, and giving all team members the fulfillment of knowing their specific role is invaluable, appreciated, and most importantly, theirs to own. Doing this, we can reduce unnecessary burdens, streamline tasks, save time, create best practices, and improve patient and employee satisfaction. At the heart of this, we're trying to continue to provide high-quality care and improve the job satisfaction of our teams. In action, for example, this reinvention looks like a deeper partnership between clinical and nutritional services by relying on our nutrition experts and their support staff, not just to prepare the food, but to play an essential role in how it's scheduled, managed, distributed, and monitored, even allowing us to systematize blood sugar and insulin needs around more standardized meal times. For our nurses, this means hands-on support for the essential but rudimentary tasks for which they're just too busy and highly skilled, like delivering trays, opening juice cartons, walking patients through the halls, and emptying trash and cleaning rooms sometimes. Instead, we want their time to be spent directly working with physicians on patient care, developing care plans, discharge plans, preparing for afternoon med pass, or spending extra time with a new patient who has higher level clinical needs. And all of this is helping to ensure our nurses are efficiently able to end their shifts, hand off their patients with confidence, and get out the door faster on the way home to their families. Beyond nutritional services, we have 11 work streams. Our teams are partnering better with pharmacy, education, mobility techs, environmental service, and more, to ensure that all of these essential workers are assuming responsibilities for their areas of care and unloading several time-consuming activities that have too long rested on the shoulders of our most scarce commodity right now, our nurses on our floors. Beyond the hands-on support, it's about bringing the newest and most technologically advanced offerings from St. Luke's, like virtual expert care. It is a virtual video communication tool that allows remote nurses, pharmacy technicians, and social work to video in to a patient room to complete admission and discharge processes, med reconciliation, and all of the time-consuming but necessary things that social work does. And each unit can decide which of these processes they think is most valuable for their unit. I cannot tell you how many smart TVs we have, but lots. TVs by themselves are not expensive, but when you're buying thousands, they add up. And Moxie. Moxie is a roving in-hospital robot. Looks a lot like Rosie from the Jeffersons. Moxie's a little shorter than I am, unfortunately not a lot shorter, and has a hand with a finger. And we are using it for deliveries of medications from the pharmacy. Moxie has a locked tummy and supply pickups, allowing our nurses to stay at the bedside where their time is more valuable. It's created by a company called Diligent Robotics. It's a state-of-the-art AI tool that we are piloting in our St. Luke's Hospital, which is a 450-bed tertiary quaternary hospital, as another innovation for our care teams. And I will tell you, you know, Moxie doesn't take breaks, except for the 2 hours that Moxie charges at night, and is already being accepted as by our care teams as just yet another ancillary helper. If you look deeper behind the shiny technology, we're also working at the foundational level, creating a simpler, better structure to our care team's day. We have dedicated care time from 7 to 10 every morning. Our nurses have a focused block of time for updates and phone conversations with families that free them from the need to constantly answer calls throughout their shift. Likewise, we've built more structure around checking vitals. We've reduced the frequency for our more routine patients, and we are working now to have automated vital sign technology. We review central supply inventories to avoid weekend shortages, coordinating pharmaceutical restock times to avoid the med pass times. Some of these are just simple things, but until you break it down at its most foundational level, you don't realize just how many things we do that are inefficient and how many extra touches we have in everything we do. And we provide on-demand educational support to clinical teams for every piece of technology and software they touch during a shift. Now, I'm a former bassoonist, and I once envisioned a career on the stage before I realized, of course, that talent and determination are not one and the same. I hope you'll allow me a little bit of analogy. Imagine for a moment, if you would, a night at the symphony. All of the musicians sit on the stage. They're all dressed in black, conveying the message that they are one body, working in harmony with nothing to distract from the music. Yet each one remains laser focused on their music and their instrument and their cue to play. Sitting in the audience, we would never expect the violinist to suddenly pick up a flute or the harpist to leave the stage and begin ushering latecomers to their seats. They each have a job to do, and each one is relying on everyone else to be in their seat, with eyes on their music, showcasing their unique talent, contributing to the masterpiece together. Our teams are just like a symphony. All of our team members are a skilled master of their craft that is vital to the overall outcome. And each of them will perform at their best only if they're allowed to shine, without distraction or burden, and only if they're really given the freedom to play the instrument they've been perfecting for their whole life. We launched earlier this year our 2-month-long care reinvention pilot on our med-surg intermediate units. We pick one at each of our 4 metro hospitals, each with a subtle difference in execution. And the initial hope, and I was naive, I thought, we're smart people, we will find this, was to find one singular solution that we could perfect, package, teach, and implement throughout our entire health system. Instead, what we found is there is no one singular solution that meets every unit's needs. In retrospect, it seems really pretty obvious, but at the time, it was a goal. We learned that what seems obvious now when it comes to reinvention, there's no out-of-the-box solution, nor should there be. What we did learn, however, through our pilot program was that while we pride ourselves in being one St. Luke's, each and every unit is unique, and each one deserves to reinvent care in the way that best suits their needs, their team, and their specific patients. Going forward, we're putting it into action in all of our med-surg intermediate units across our metro hospitals, our ICUs, and some of our specialized care units like transplant are exempted from that. And we're putting the care teams at the helm of their own reinvention. We have a set of work streams. There are 12 in all total. They're piloted and they're proven support strategies, and each unit is collaborating to create the structure that'll best meet their patient's team's need. For instance, one unit might see tremendous value in a more efficient handoff process while forgoing the partnership with nutritional services because their unit particularly enjoys meal ordering time. Now, I will tell you, we went from 52 diets to 14. It's still a room service program, but we decided we probably did not need 52 diets. Some of my team advocated that we go back to what we grew up in childhood. If mom put it on the table, you ate it. But that seemed perhaps a little on the extreme side. You know, another unit may find that 3-hour block of dedicated care time too restrictive for the immediate and rapidly changing needs of their patients, but they find the virtual expert care a game changer for efficiently managing tasks on the unit. But of course, we know better than to think all or even most of the solutions we have will live within the walls of the hospital. It's just not the case. And as I described earlier, we now live in a world of smart tech designed to make the tasks and connectivity of our lives faster, easier, and better. And it's no surprise then that our patients expect quality on their terms and their convenience. In a pre-COVID world, most physicians were reluctant to try virtual care, let alone put it in their regular schedules. Then practically overnight, as you all know, that changed, leading us to now one exceptionally rare time when we can collectively say, thanks to the COVID pandemic, that improved. And what we learned coming out of that crisis was more than eye-opening. We realized with the right strategy, it could be transformative. So what we did was follow Winston Churchill's famed call to action and decided not to let a good crisis go to waste. With far too many beds closed around the system and in Kansas City in general, we were trying our best to manage with a diminished workforce. Our leadership team knew that to break through everything, we had to push boldly forward, take risks, and innovate. So that meant working with the right partners. How do we connect providers with their patients? How do we connect patients with information? And how do we connect everyone with the tools and resources to improve and save their life? I'm proud to say that just about 10 weeks ago, working with the exceptional tech minds at a rapidly growing company called Medically Home Group, St. Luke's was able to fill dozens of beds. In fact, they weren't just beds, they were hospitals. Dozens of hospitals right in our patient's home with St. Luke's Hospital in Your Home. More than traditional home care or virtual urgent care, St. Luke's Hospital in Your Home now helps redirect certain appropriate high acuity patients to receive care in the comfort of their own home, delivered through a hybrid solution of state-of-the-art virtual technology and skilled in-person at-home care. At the heart of this innovative leading-edge model is a 24/7 medical command center run by an around-the-clock team of hospitalists, APPs, RNs, and patient care coordinators, all led by a medical director focused exclusively on this new care model and aided by a highly skilled tech support team to ensure a seamless connection for care. In a post-COVID world, St. Luke's Hospital in Your Home allows us to continue providing exceptional care at a lower cost in an environment that our patients don't just tolerate, they actually prefer. Within 2 hours of admission, sometimes before they even make it back home from the ED, they receive a coordinated delivery and setup of a complete suite of essential supplies and self-contained technology, including monitors, tablet, a landline phone, Wi-Fi routers, and more. Absolutely everything our patients and their loved ones or caregivers need to secure hospital-level care at home. Not to mention all the training, education, and on-call support. It's a one-button push to use it all with confidence. But does that mean all Hospital in Your Home will be virtual care? Absolutely not. Not even close. Because while we know our patients crave comfort and convenience, we also know their health and wellness are best safeguarded and maintained by face-to-face connection and personal hands-on care. That's why our patients receive daily, virtual, and at-home visits from care team members or community paramedics. We're even able to provide 18 acute rapid response services at the patient's home, from lab to phlebotomy, home infusion, and mobile diagnostic. And let's be clear, this isn't about convenience, nor is it simply about cost. It's about finding a new and better way to deliver care in a very different post-COVID world. And I'm proud to share it's gotten off to an incredibly successful start. 8 weeks after its launch, we've admitted just about 60 patients, more than twice as many as projected. Nearly half were women. Their average age was 77. 45% came directly from the emergency room, and only 1% returned to the hospital while they were in the program. Their average length of stay is 4.2 days. I'll tell you that's a little lower than if they were in our hospital. And on average, the time that it took for the patient from admission to ED to full setup at home was just 3 hours. And that's just the numbers. Even better, the responses. We have top box satisfaction scores of 85%, and we're getting a lot of feedback. One patient called it a great service, the future of medicine. Another thanked us for providing a way for my 85-year-old father with dementia to return to his home, bedroom, and familiar surroundings. While one said those sort of 10 little words that every health system executive wants to hear, I want to transition all of my and my family's care to St. Luke's. I wish that we were all collaborators in the Kansas City market like you are in Vermont, but I will tell you there's a little competitive edge there. For these patients, they were suffering heart failure, COPD, pneumonia, COVID, and even a diabetic foot ulcer. They've told us time and time again that they were relieved and reassured to learn that they could stay home. So, you know, throughout the extent of the COVID crisis, our hospital teams have seen true pain, suffering, and tragedy. They've operated under battlefield-like scenarios, endured abuse, verbal and physical, from angry patients and terrified families. And as was shown in the video, they've all carried on, trying to serve the mission and the patient, trying to do the job the best they can, not just tired, but fatigued to their core. I often tell people if you're tired, you can get extra rest. If you're fatigued, that is an entirely different paradigm. So how do we guide them through this, or more accurately, out of this? We start by listening and we build from there. Because the truth is, we just don't want to hear our employees' fears ideas, concerns, questions, and worries, we absolutely must hear them. Why? Because not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. By listening with a goal to understand, with an objective to find lasting solutions through collaboration, we can strengthen the team and the mission. We can boost satisfaction for patients and employees. We can improve margins and continue serving, caring, and saving lives. Because at the core of what we do, we are here to provide the best care we possibly can for patients. It is a privilege to do what we do. In practice, this translates as courage, not the kind of courage shown by running into burning buildings or even performing complex, risky procedures. I mean courage at its root. The word itself comes from the Latin word cor, meaning heart, to lead with one's heart. And it's about being unafraid to take a little risk. I constantly tell my team to take chances, to be bold, but always do it with the patients and our people at the forefront of every decision. I have their back. All they need to do is tell me what they need to make their vision a reality. And in the end, the risk is almost always worth taking, even if that reward is to learn what doesn't work. But of course, even better is what we learn what does. And there is so much working, and we forget about that sometimes. Strategic partnerships with nursing colleges and other higher ed institutions are yielding accelerated training programs that will get more LPNs and nursing assistants trained and into the workforce, will help identify and hire more nursing graduates, and will put more skilled minds and helpful hands at the patient's bedside or at their front door or on their virtual visit screen. A bold commitment to flexibility and innovation is leading us in exciting new ways forward, emboldening us to try those newly discovered methods and tools we've heard so much about, while also giving us the permission and fortitude to know when it's time to stop, to change lanes or change course or even begin again. Because we know that it's within this space, within these minds, that innovation is born. It's important to realize as we look back at all we've endured these past few years, there are potentially thousands of different lessons we can and should take away from the pandemic. The only ones that matter, though, are those that do more than improve the quality of care we give and strengthen the team we have today. We also need lessons that will help us shape a new kind of healthcare for tomorrow. We may not know exactly what it looks like, but things are starting to come into focus. Our job now is to keep listening, keep innovating, and keep working to find the solutions that will last. That's the charge. It's well worth your effort and mine for our patients, our people, our mission, our community, and for the new kind of health care we can start building together today. Because as the recently departed Queen Elizabeth II once said, when life seems hard, the courageous do not lie down and accept defeat. Instead, they are all the more determined to struggle for a better future. We have the power to have a better future. I want to thank you for having me. I want to thank you for your time and your attention, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to return to Vermont. Now, Mike told me that we would have time for questions, comments, complaints, whatever is most important.
I have a question. So you mentioned. Just a minute. Oh, sorry. So, Dr. Estes, you mentioned that your focus was, or your questions were two things, or your focus was two things: what's good for the patient and what's good for the care team. And then you brought a whole bunch of consultants into their space. What was their reaction then? and what is it now after that, you sort of measured their work?
We didn't bring consultants in. We did that ourselves.
Oh, beautiful.
We have a project management group we call the PMO, and we used our own internal resources. Our PMO happens to be led, however, by someone who was a longtime consultant with Deloitte. So we used our own consultants because we felt that if we brought in a host of consultants from outside, that we wouldn't be putting. We wanted our people to help design, not the dark suits who often come with all of those groups. So we used our own folks.
Fantastic, thank you.
Joe, did I see you?
Excuse me.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciated your speech. That was absolutely excellent, very inspiring, and it's so nice to be here in person as opposed to listening to a YouTube. I'm a big fan of Broadway. There's a difference between live discussion versus sort of seeing it and hitting pause. So this has been really inspiring. And I appreciate that the breadth and depth of operations that you covered in all of these issues. It was hard to take all that in, but you really did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And again, it's really inspiring to think about what we do each and every day and how even presentations like this are going to change us or not. And we just sort of, this has been great. A couple things. I really appreciate you saying celebrate the simple things, because sometimes we don't do that. And also working to the top of your license for everybody. Although I wanted to comment and get your thoughts about this. Sometimes I think there's a glass ceiling when we talk about the top of the license, because there are levels below that. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the nursing pipeline, which you referenced, which is drying up, we're sort of stuck in that mantra that, the people that teach nurses need to be masters or PhDs, and the process of even teaching doctors or other clinicians, as opposed to saying, oh my goodness, we've got a 30-year experienced nurse over here who is so smart, has amazing common sense, but she's not able to teach the new nurses. And we get stuck in this academic exercise of how we teach people. And that becomes a real problem. It's very expensive. So I feel like we've lost the common sense of moving quick enough to say, how do we teach and how do we get the best and brightest teachers as opposed to getting somebody that's got all the credentials? Because in life, I've met a lot of people, not a lot. Sometimes I've met people with amazing credentials, and they can't really even order off a menu. And it's like, wow, how did you get that job and that position? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the pipeline and academics. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually Anna Noonan and I were having a conversation last night that relates very much to different training. At Central Vermont, they have a program to train LPNs. I remember, of course, when we wanted to rid our hospitals of LPNs because they didn't, quote, have critical thinking skills. And now, as we said last night, when we looked around and we need them, they aren't there. And so they're training cohorts of LPNs. We are training 50 nursing assistants every 4 weeks. We hire them, we pay them while we train them, we guarantee them a job. We have a 91% retention rate, and the way we're doing it, these are our people. Our nurses, our people are the instructors. We are training them in our own environments, of which, to your point, we have a tremendous number of very skilled, very smart people who very much feel privileged to be able to be a part of this. In terms of the, sometimes I think, and there are a lot of academics in here, sometimes, we are pretty set in our ways, but I've rarely seen people more set in their ways than nursing faculty. There are clearly roles for PhD nurses, but we don't have enough. And so one of the things that is beginning to bubble up nationwide, much like Truveta, the data company, or pharmaceutical initiatives that have happened as hospitals have come together, is trying to figure out a nationwide education consortium where we could partner with an enlightened nursing school to provide 2 years of training, of basic courses, a lot of which could be online, and then do the next 2 years, let us be the instructors. Let us train people in our institutions, academic or just large, complex, and improve and increase that pipeline. Maybe we could cut that 80,000 down to 40,000, which would be a huge win. So there's beginning to be some national movement around that. The same is true with, training, you name it, lab people, radiology. So I couldn't agree with you more, but I think, we have to, we're the ones who are on the, who are suffering from the workforce issues. We need to figure out how we can solve them. And there's some movement happening with a nationwide consortium. We'll see where it goes.
Mindy, thank you for an inspiring speech. I'm curious, and this is probably a little granular, what we have found over the last number of years in Vermont, that transformation is hard, transformation is expensive. And with what's going on with your hospital at home programs, have you found payers to be good partners? And does that partnership also include support? You're saving the money, but are they willing to chip in and do the necessary investments to make this work?
The answer is maybe. Right now, Medicare is, our average age is 77. There's no accident about that, because Medicare is paying for hospital in your home at the same level as they pay for hospital care. Humana is partnering with us, as is Aetna. Our largest provider in our market is Blue Cross of Kansas City, who don't see the value in hospital in your home. And I like to say yet, but I'm not sure that yet is right. Yeah. Yeah, you have a very different Blue Cross here in Vermont. I remember them. So some are partnering, and is it lower cost care? I think ultimately it will be, because as we see readmissions decline, as we see rebound emergency room visits decline, as we see length of stay decline, and our quality numbers, we are fastidiously collecting quality metrics, and our quality metrics are equal to what we see, or not better, in the hospital. We've had one fall, and it was a non-injury injury fall. But payers are slow to embrace this. And the other real issue is that, we're doing this under the waivers that came from the emergency declaration. And, with the president standing up and saying the pandemic is over, there are political forces trying to say that emergency declaration should go away. There is legislation that AHA has been all over that is, I think, attached to, the government people here know better than I, attached to the refund the government bill that we hope will codify some of those waivers, the hospital in your home part being one, because it certainly is shown to be effective. But the payers are tough as ever. Claudia.
Thanks so much, Mindy. For one of the challenges during this pandemic is we haven't had a chance to hear from other leaders and learn new ideas. So this has been very helpful and inspiring. We appreciate it. As you know, Vermont, half of our hospitals are still small, independent community hospitals or critical access hospitals. And some of this innovation work, can you do it as an independent hospital? And do you have any advice for how do you garner the resources as a small organization to do that?
Well, I will be in full transparency. You notice that I referred to what we've done as in our metro hospitals. We have not done care pilots in our critical access hospitals for a couple of reasons. Just the scale and scope to pilot, and the time, because as many of you in this room know, people wear multiple hats, and so we wanted to see what we could do in a larger setting. However, we use virtual specialty care in our critical access hospitals. We have in-touch virtual machines. We use virtual rounding by our hospitalists, and we are now extending some of the things that I said are pretty simple and foundational, whether it's nutrition services, whether it's dedicated time to talk to patients' families, whether it's mobility techs. We've used some of our nursing assistants who do nothing but walk patients, and guess what happens? The patients get up more. The mobility techs like it, and they develop relationships, and there's another task that somebody's going to get to, but as often happens, there are many tasks. So we're beginning to roll out some of those smaller, more obvious things that are not all that expensive. The nutrition services piece was really interesting to me. We wrangled over when should breakfast be, when should lunch be? When should dinner be? I thought this would be easy. It was not. And you know, if you need a meal, you'll get a meal anytime you need a meal. But we finally decided on the hours, and what we've seen is we're now able, from you know, an insulin perspective, to stabilize with standardized meal times. We can control our diabetic patients far easier. So I think there are some things like that that are applicable to any hospital of any shape and size. Virtual expert care it's you know, it's not as expensive as some of the things we do, but it certainly requires an investment. But what's interesting is we're bringing those people into our command center to train for 6 weeks, and then that's going to be a totally remote workforce. The nurse, the pharmacy tech, the social worker, and what we find is that's a different pool of people for us to recruit from. And we've actually, I was telling folks last night, we've actually called up some of our nurses who've left us who aren't happy doing, you know, insurance authorizations, but who don't want to return to the heavy lifting of the bedside, who've said, this would be great. So it gives us a different pool of people to recruit from. So I think there are some of the things that can be done in any size hospital, and sometimes I think we think innovation has to be transformational, but you know, innovation, process innovation, looking at the way you've always done something, it's incremental innovation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I, of course, had the privilege of talking with you a bit last night, and one of the things that I think would be interesting for this audience, since you've just weathered a crisis that we have not, when half of your hospitals, or I should say half of the service area, now has very different rules impacting reproductive health. And I think it would be interesting to just hear a little bit about how you pivoted so fast and trying to manage both your staff and patients in that situation.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. And to the point of, to Claudio's point of, you know, getting out and about and hearing what's going on with other people, I will tell you, as tumultuous as it might be here in Vermont, be lucky you're here. We serve Kansas and Missouri. Let me put Kansas aside for a second. Missouri is a deeply red state. And when the Dobbs decision was announced and Roe v. Wade was overturned, 17 minutes later, the Attorney General of Missouri signed into law the trigger law that was tied to that in Missouri over abortion. It bans all abortion. There are no exceptions for rape. There's no exception for incest. There is no exception for fatal fetal anomaly. There is an exception for the health of the mother if the mother is in extremis. there was no grace period. You know, you didn't have 2 weeks or a month or whatever to figure out what you were going to do. Whatever day in July that happened, the law of the land in Missouri changed at 11/17. The onus of deciding who is in extremis falls on the provider, and the provider may do an abortion. We do not at St. Luke's do elective abortions. We are a part of, we're an Episcopal system, but we do have a large maternal fetal program and a large women's heart program, and 70-bed NICUs, so we certainly care about this. And the provider then has to justify the decision retrospectively with a panel of, quote, independent experts. And I'll leave you to decide what independent expert means. If they decide that that abortion was not justified, it is a Class B felony. So it is a criminal penalty in the state of Vermont. I'm back. State of Missouri. And we've asked for clarity, but of course there will be no clarity because fear is what this is decided to generate. So we have lost 4 of our 5 maternal fetal medicine providers in the space of 3 months. Why do I want to be here when I can come to Vermont? I can go somewhere else. We have done only 1 termination, and I feel quite confident that the health of the mother was in great jeopardy. And we have done a number of things. Life begins at conception, so IUDs are not available. Plan B, the real question is it 3 hours, 5 hours, 5 days? So we are sending our folks who need that to our Kansas hospitals because you all read that Kansas, at least for now, has allowed abortion to continue and emergency contraception to continue. It has been a real challenge. We have our general counsel, who is a Vermonter. We've put together with our in-house legal, with some external help, we have a legal hotline. So any of our providers who are faced with a situation, who have concern, it's a 24/7. Our lawyers are taking call, which, just seems ironic to me. But our goal is to do what's right for our patients and to protect our providers. In Kansas right now, we're good. However, we have a gubernatorial race happening. Our incumbent governor in Kansas is a Democrat. She is opposed by a very pro-life Republican, and we have a very pro-life legislature in Kansas. And she's neck and neck right now, which I think is of comfort to all of us, because if she should be reelected, I think we're okay. If not, I believe Kansas will go the way of Missouri. So it is difficult times, and one of the things that really bothers me is this whole notion of which this is the most obvious and draconian example really is the legislation of medicine and the erosion of fundamental rights. But we face it every single day, as do all of the providers in our region. In Kansas City itself is about 3.5 million people, and then we have a broad geographic distribution. So, yeah, we were talking about that last night. It's tough times.
Any ideas about how to, in this environment, get the level of discourse so that anyone understands just how the breadth of negative impact of that type of change?
Well, we are trying. And I was on a call earlier this week with a group of of female CEOs from across the country, many names you would recognize, trying to, in what we consider to be a safe space, talking about just that conversation. How do we raise the level? Can we get people's attention with economics? We don't seem to be able, at least in our area, to get people's attention based on, you're taking away rights and lives will be lost. But is it economics? Is it if we could, there are 6,000 hospitals in the United States, 5,000 of which are part of AHA. If we could get 3,000 of those to say, if this continues, you're not going to be able to get your heart attack treated either. So we were trying to brainstorm, and it's not immediately obvious because, and I told Ann this last night, I had a conversation with a Missouri legislator who, from our area, represents one of our hospitals in eastern Jackson County, which is an affluent area of Missouri, of Kansas City, the metro. And he said to me, he asked how we were doing, and I said, okay. And he said, well, he said, hope you're complying with the law. And I said, absolutely. I said, we comply with every regulation and law. That's our job and that's our duty. And I said, it is difficult, and I named a couple of things. And he said, it's a good thing you're close to the end of your career. And I said, well, why is that? And that's what I should have said. But I said, why is that? And he said, well, because he said, I really think that our new laws will make it so women stay home so that those jobs can go to men. So there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of politics, and it's not immediately obvious to me how we mobilize to have the level of discourse when somebody stands there and tells me that. And then is surprised. Because I asked him, I said, do you have daughters? And he said, they're God-fearing Christians, they stay home. We have a whole group we could ship. Well, I stand between you and lunch, and I will be around at lunch, and I appreciate the opportunity and the engagement. Thank you.